Thank you, Ray. Folks, I have missed you. I tell you what, it's good to be back and good to see you. I thought about 35 years that I put the program together, and I think quality was the theme, or at least a sub-theme. Is it not on? I got, so back at headquarters at mission statement, that was not on? Okay. Let me start all over. It's even better to see you now. Folks, it's good to be here. And over those 35 years, quality was an emphasis of this whole conference, and we continue that today. As I look out and look at this audience, I see some of the absolute best alfalfa producers, not only in Kentucky, but there's several here from other states. That's good. Our friends from Tennessee are back with us again. So it's good to be with you. And when I think about those two scenarios, and I think about this book, and I put this up for two reasons. Most of you have a copy of this. If you don't, see Ray or me, and we'll probably get you one. But when we got that book ready to go to press, I thought about a gentleman who has sat right back there in the 35 years. He probably didn't miss very many. And that's the person whose name is right over here to the left. His name is Russell Hackley. Most of you know him, one of the best forage supporters I ever had. And Russell put a statement on there, beware of emotional decisions. I thought so much of that I really bargained to get that on the front. So I put that in there. We've got a new one that we're going to press with that we'll have by the next time you get here. But there was another quote in there that I thought I would be unique and share because of what I think today. But you've already seen this, but I want to show it to you again. I like it so much, and that is this. People need to be reminded more often than they need to be instructed. I'm not going to tell you anything you don't already know about alfalfa quality, but I'm going to remind you about some of the things that the other speakers have said, and they've done a great job of preparing us for where I want to be right now. And I want to remind you that the things that you know are important. The things that you're doing are important, so keep doing them. So as we think about that, as we go through this, I also want to remind you that on the website, there is an excellent booklet of understanding forage quality. We got together several years ago and wrote that one, so go on there and look at that for greater detail, helping define more of these terms, do some of the calculations. It's in that publication. Also, with the time constraints, I won't be talking a lot about grazing, but we've emphasized that a lot over the years. But the principles I'm going to talk about will apply. So as we think about this, I want to make sure that we remember, you and I are working with a premier crop, alfalfa. Alfalfa deserves that name as queen of the forage crops. It certainly deserves it because it has such high yield potential. It has such high quality potential. When you look at that, just look at this on average daily gains, and Jeff Lemkuehler's in the audience. He's very familiar with this data. But you look at all the other species compared in that trial, and you look where alfalfa ranked. Number one in average daily gains. Compared to all of those, we could have put a whole lot of other things in there. So alfalfa has a tremendously high quality potential. It's mine and your job as managers to capture just as much of that and market just as much of that as possible. Now, when I think about alfalfa, a crop that I worked with throughout my career, a crop I did my PhD thesis on, it's a crop that I have tremendous respect for. Every year that I work with that crop, I respect it even more. It's a crop that I think has four basic phases. Four basic phases in its overall production and marketing, and four overall objectives. And we've covered these first two this morning. We've talked in detail about the importance of establishment. And the end result of all the things that Chris talked about is to end up with a good, thick, dense, weed-free stand. If we've got that, then we have the potential for high yields. And then if we get where most of us are going to be on established stands here just in a few short days or weeks, it's going to start growing. And we get then into the production phase. And our overall goal during that production, we want to make sure that photosynthetic factory is working efficiently. And our goal is to keep the insects and disease from robbing us. Our goal is to make sure we have that fertility where we want it so we can produce just as much dry matter as we possibly can throughout that growing season. And then we come to number three, and that's the harvest phase. Sometimes we're going to, during that growth cycle, when we get to that first growth stage, we get to that first time when we're in the bud stage, we're going to think about harvesting. And then our harvest, we're going to open the gate and turn some animals in a rotationally grazed system, or we're going to bring some equipment in and start the harvest. Now our goal during the harvest cycle is to capture just as much of that quality as we can. So we want to harvest for quality, and then at the end of the day, or at the end of the season, we want to market that either in the form of a ruminant or in the form of milk or in the form of hay or baleage for a profit. That's where we want to go. When we look at the factors affecting quality, we've already talked about a lot of those today. They range from varieties to soils and fertilities and pest and growing condition, stage of maturity, harvesting and handling, storing, weather, and you could probably put some more in there. When I look at those over my career and I think about of all the factors affecting the quality that I've seen in your barns or the quality that I've seen in your fields, without question, my belief is the single most important factor impacting quality is the stage of maturity, the age of the plant that we utilize it. I think it trumps everything else. Now there, on individual cases, can be different. Now when we think about that, put this one in. This is a local picture. Christopher, you recognize some people in that. This is the Gerald's operation. I put that in because that's my image of what quality should be. You're never going to increase quality beyond this stage. You have set the bar right there. And if we set the bar high, we're going to lose, but we hopefully will end up with still a high quality product. If you set the bar low by going in there way too late, you're going to lose and you're going to have lower quality. So that's my example of what it should be. They're starting off extremely high. Now our challenge as managers from here until the day we sell it is to minimize the amount of quality and dry matter loss that occurs. And that's a challenge. So as we think about that, here's the basic principle. Young plants are higher in quality, low in yielding. So as managers, we've got to let that grow. We've got to get enough yield out there to either graze or harvest. But in doing that, we're going to lose quality. So if you look at that, look at any quality parameter that you want to measure, and it's going to decline with age. Now that doesn't apply to human beings. Retired people continue to increase in quality. You young people, it'll take you a while for that to settle in. I have to remind myself every morning of that. But anyway, now look what happens to yield. Yield continues to go up at some point, then we get into a seed stage and it begins to level off and decline. Now let's look at this in a little more detail. Why does quality decline so rapidly? Why does it decline? Look at overall yield, total yield, the bar on top, and look how closely stem yields parallels that. And then look down here, leaf yield changes, but not nearly as drastic. So when we think about that, and we're getting more and more stems, the leaf to stem ratio is changing. That's why that quality declines. So what we're doing is we're looking to try to optimize that. We've got to get to some compromise where we can get good yields, acceptable yields, and good quality. That usually changes in that late bud to very early flowering stage. Now looking at this, I want to just show you a very small window. This is a window in an alfalfa plant from vegetative to first flower. If we put it in vegetative to 10% bloom, 50% bloom, these numbers escalate. If we look at that just in that short window, we're losing about 1/4% protein. We're increasing NDF and ADF. Both of those we want to be low. RFB, relative feed value, is declining about almost 5 per day, but 4.34. Milk per ton is dropping 22 pounds, and live weight gains per ton per pound about 3.5 a day. That's a short window. That shows you how dramatic quality is changing and the impact of stage of maturity on that. Now, after we've made that decision, the next critical decision occurs over several days and several different operations, and that is to save the leaves. What you and I want to sell, what we want to harvest and feed to our animals, the majority of that is contained in the leaves. That's the highest nutrient components of a plant. We carry the stems in simply to hold the leaves, but we want those to be small and minimal. So our challenge there is to save the leaves. Tony, you recognize yourself in any of those tractors there? Now, if we think about that, the next major decision is what moisture we're going to put it up at. The moisture that we harvest that, if we're grazing, we can harvest it 85% moisture. But harvesting beyond any package type, we've got to start drying it down. That first moisture comes out pretty quick. But the closer we get down into that 30s and 20s, those percent moisture is slow and hard to get out. So when we think about that, we've got to get that moisture dried down from 85 to 16, 18, 14, 20%. That challenge is when we get down there, we can start losing leaves in a hurry. So how we handle that hay, when we rake, when we ted, when we bale, how we bale, RPM, speed, all of those are extremely important. Our goal is to save the leaves, get it down to this point as quickly as possible, and then get it into a package. Moisture management's important because if last year I was called out on a situation where we didn't have a barn on fire, but we had stacks of round bales on fire. And that didn't happen necessarily from somebody throwing a cigarette out because this was a long way from the road. It happened because of spontaneous combustion. When you see that heat going up, we've got a lot of organisms in there doing it. It can get to a point where it can just spontaneously combust, and then when that happens, we get something like this. And it's a challenge for us. Now, alfalfa is a valuable crop. It's a high quality crop. It is absolutely too good not to protect it during storage and not to protect it in a way that we can't preserve what we've got. We can take our fescue, we can take these round bales, they'll thatch over pretty good and they'll stay out there. But alfalfa is just not going to do that. So in alfalfa, we need to protect that for whatever storage mechanism you want. And then when we get to the marketing stage, regardless of what that product's in, whether it's in a stocker animal, whether it's in the milk tank, or whether it's in different size bales, our challenge there is to make sure that we cover the investment that we've already put in this crop. So we want to market for profit. One of the areas that I think in alfalfa is we don't do as good a job of telling and helping to educate our customers on how much better our quality is and how much more that they can pay for that and still do the job. So in Kentucky, we're very fortunate. We've got a good testing program. And this didn't come about overnight, and it's not to the point where I think the whole system would like for it to be, but it's good. And I encourage you to use that. I encourage you to, when you see your Commissioner of Agriculture, to continue to encourage him to support it and expand it. So that not only tells us through our hay testing program what we've got, but it gives you another marketing tool to document that it's not just your word, I've got good hay. It documents what they got. Now, some of your clients could care less. If it's nice and green, doesn't have any dust or mold, they might buy. But to your dairymen, to the people who are interested in quality, they're willing to pay more for it. So if I reduced it down to the most important factors that I see, stage of maturity without question is number one. Moisture management from the time you cut it or harvest it until you sell it is number two. Throughout that process, the most critical decision that we need to make is what will my action today do to the leaves? And if it's destroying the leaves, it's destroying your crop. And then timeliness. You know, getting in there a little bit late with a tedder, tedding at too high a speed, any of those can be so destructive on those leaves. What is this operation? Papa used to tell me to handle the hay in case. I had no clue what he was talking about, but I knew if I didn't do it right, he would correct me. But that's what he's talking about. Handling that hay at the proper moisture content for the particular operation that you're trying to do. That's what we want to try to do. At the end of the day, if we can do all that, I am confident we'll be able to market it and be able to not only cover our investment, but to give us some extra to reward us for doing things right. Now, this is some data that a good friend of mine, I've had him right here on the stage, Dr. Dan Undersander. In Wisconsin, they've been running hay auctions for many, many years. Now, people who come to those auctions are primarily dairymen. Dairymen are very interested in the quality, so they're willing to pay more. Now, remember when we went from vegetative to first flower? Remember when we showed how many relative feed value points drop there was? If you round that off to about $1 a point, what it came to. $1 a point for every change in relative feed value point. You think of how much we were losing there, about $5 a day for every day we delayed beyond that. We also lose another thing. We are one day farther away from that next harvest. And a lot of times we don't appreciate that, especially as we think about that second harvest coming on. So I think when we think about those, all of it comes back. Alfalfa has potential to produce extremely high quality. Our challenge is to be able to capture and market as much of that quality as we possibly can. Every one of the things that was talked about here before me are critically important. We can't get to a point where we've got a thin stand, not fertilized, insects, disease, or weed problems, and expect to go in there and cut it as early as we want and have a high quality product. It all comes together as the system that you manage every day. I wish you the absolute best luck in your 2018 haying season. And Ray, I'll stop there. By the way, one thing before we get questions, I want to, if I had a gift, I would give it to the person, the long distance award today. Now, Ray Smith is here, but he's probably still suffering a little bit from jet lag because he just got back from Kenya. Ray is our representative, not only just for Kentucky, he is the chairman of the continuing committee of the International Grassland Congress. And I'm so proud of him. I'm proud of Kentucky because anything good that happens to Kentucky looks good on me. So give Ray a big hand for chairing that committee. Yes, sir. Yeah, basically, tedding is a wonderful machine, but it can also be the most destructive thing you pull in the field. The basic thing there is handling that when you've got enough moisture in those leaf stem, those petioles, to make sure you hold it on. So earlier the better. If it waits till you wait till it gets very dry. When it starts getting below that 50%, the tedder can be bad. A lot of people wait just a few hours after they mow it. You go from 85 down to 65, and then you're in good shape. So you've got a window there that you can do it. But then I have seen tedders just literally de-leaf alfalfa. Speed is critical. That's exactly right. We had one time, Clayton Gerald came up and I said, Clayton, I want you to talk about machinery. You know what he started with was operation manuals. You know, a lot of times I don't read my manual unless my machine breaks down. Then I thumb through to try to figure it. But every one of these machines that we have in the haymaking business is designed to operate at a certain speed. And you know, you operate a square baler way too fast, and you can beat the leaves off there. So think about it. What is it doing to my leaves as it goes through? When leaves are held on tight, we can be pretty aggressive with it. But when they get dry, man, they're fragile, and we need to hold them on. Now, in the publications we have on there, we walk you through those moisture. So you have a window of moisture content. But now the window on baling, the person that I visited last year that had those round bales on fire, they weren't the first time to bale hay. Sometimes we get fooled by the weather. And he said as soon as he picked that bale up, he knew it was heavier than normal, and he left them outside, and they caught. So it's kind of rare, but it is possible for that to happen. You stack a bunch of hay in the barn, you got one bale right in the middle that's wet. You got a few old dock plants or something in there. It only takes one. You know, we think about the Great Chicago Fire. We talk about how it was a lantern kicked over by her cow. That wasn't what happened. Now, I don't want you to go out and tell anybody this, but it was spontaneous combustion from some hay up in the loft that caused that. Now, I'd rather the cow and the lantern get blamed than the hay, but so anyway, that was an editorial I added on. Folks, thank you so much. And Ray, we're in great shape for lunch or for speakers, other speakers.